Has it occurred to anyone else that when it comes to ghost stories, legends, and things of those nature, we oftentimes know very little about the subject? We are very well aware, though, that Savannah, our beloved Savannah, Georgia, has a very haunted past, a very haunted vibe, a spookiness of epic proportions, if you will. Today we're spilling the tea on the residents of Wright Square. We're going to do a little history on Wright Square, though, just to give us an idea. It had several names, but it was first named after John, Lord Viscount Percival, Earl of Egmont, in 1733. If I butcher these names, I'm sorry, y'all. It's going to happen, but I'll do my best. So then it was known as Percival Square. And they named it after this Viscount because he played a huge part in the founding of Georgia. And I guess that's a good reason to get a square named after you, right? However, in 1763, they changed it to Wright Square to honor another man named Sir James Wright, who was the last royal governor of the province of Georgia. It can also be referred to as Post Office Square, Courthouse Square, or the Hanging Square. And since its original colonial days, there has been a hub of activity in this square for events such as the monthly auctions, government bond, the courthouse, basically anything you could want or need. There are probably many permanent residents that we just don't see or they don't make themselves known, but we're going to talk about a few of them today, and one of those is Chief Tomo Chichi. In 1739, Savannah's first monument was created to honor him. He was buried in the center of the square, and this was because he was being honored for his work in cooperation and in peace and just helping establish Georgia, essentially. Very little is known about his early life, and there's a lot of speculation. He was believed to be born in 1644 as a Creek with ties to the Creek Confederacy and to the Yamasee tribes that today would be Georgia. Around 1728, he got the wild hair to form his own tribe, the Yamacraw, which consisted of about 200 lower creeks and Yamasees. They did break away from their respective tribes following disagreements over the future of relations with Europeans. And then they settled on the bluffs of the Savannah River. When Georgia was founded, he wasn't afraid of the new colonists, but he definitely used caution in the beginning nonetheless. With the efforts of interpreter Mary Musgrove himself and James Oglethorpe, the founder of Georgia, a treaty was drafted allowing the establishment of Georgia and for our dear chief to benefit through trade with the colonists. It seems that the Yamacraw, quote, freely gave up their rights to all the land they did not use themselves, end quote. You can see why they probably had to create their own tribe, because I'm sure a lot of Native Americans didn't feel the same way. Now, once that agreement was agreed upon, gifts were exchanged between James Oglethorpe and our dear chief. He gave Oglethorpe buffalo skins with an eagle head and feathers painted on it. Oglethorpe gave him European-styled clothing, cloth, gunpowder, tobacco, and pipes. It wasn't just our dear chief who was invaluable to the colonists in the early years. It was his tribe as well. They helped lay out roads, including the first run from Savannah to Darien, or New Inverness, to the south. They also aided Oglethorpe as a mediator between the Yamacraw and surrounding tribes and colonists. Our dear chief accompanied Oglethorpe to Great Britain in 1734, with some of the members of his family and some tribesmen. That's when he met British dignitaries, King George II, Queen Caroline, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Parliament, and with the Georgia trustees. That's big stuff, y'all. Big stuff. He even went so far as to present the king and the Georgia trustees with the request of the Yamacraw for education and fair trade. He even gifted King George II the feathers of an eagle, a live eagle, and a bear cub. This was a sign of respect. Fun fact, the Yamacraw delegation toured the Tower of London and viewed the Royal Menagerie, a collection of wild or foreign animals kept especially for exhibition. The Earl of Egmont asked him what souvenirs he would like to bring back to Georgia after his visit to London. Well, Tomochichi answered he would like to have the lion from the Royal Menagerie. Well, the Earl of Egmont probably couldn't give him that, but he did present him later with a drawing of the lion. So I would say relations were doing okay, if that's any indication at that moment. Well, once he got back to Georgia, Tomochichi met with the Lower Creek chieftains and persuaded them to ally with the British. And it is noted that Oglethorpe and Tomochichi asked advice of one another in order to move forward for Georgia. They had a very good relationship. But in August of 1739, Tomochichi got sick, so he was unable to accompany Oglethorpe to reinforce existing relationships and issues such as land and boundaries. October 5th of 1739, our dear chief Tomochichi passed away. Some believe he was in his 90s, but some think he was younger, so we don't obviously know his true age. But he had expressed a desire to be buried in the town he helped establish. Oglethorpe was a pallbearer at the funeral, the military funeral that was held for him. And this is why he was buried in the middle of Wright Square with his grave marked with a pyramid of stones. Now, unfortunately, you won't be able to see the original gravesite yourself, because 100 years after this was all done, a memorial to William Washington Gordon was built in the center of Wright Square. They unceremoniously removed Tomochichi's remains, scattering them up around the plot of land. Now, our preservationists knew this was unacceptable, and they created a new memorial for him. This monument, though, was made of granite stone, and it stands at the southeast corner of Wright Square. It's said that if you run around his monument 3 times saying his name, you might just catch a glimpse of him. If you do this, please let us know. Email us, put it on the Facebook. We would love for that tea to be poured. But our dear chieftain Tomochichi was one of the reasons that Georgia was doing what it did. Imagine weeks on turbulent sea in a ship limping along, leaving you so famished that you were nearly dead from starvation when you arrive at your destination. The only thing keeping you sane is the hope of a new beginning. Surely an opportunity better than famine. Life wasn't going to be much easier, but it had to be better than what you had left behind. Meet Alice Riley, a resilient Irish girl ready for a new life. Now I say girl because when she escaped the Irish famine of 1733, or rather in 1733, she became an indentured servant at the age of 15, or so we think, in Georgia. Now, some say she could have been anywhere from 14 to 17, and some even wonder if she knew her own age. Okay, guys, so there's no true fact of how old she was. She was a teenager, leaving a country in an issue of famine, which means basically she was going to starve to death to try her hand at a new life in the Americas. Now, she came over to Georgia as an indentured servant. An indentured servant, as a reminder to all of us, is just someone who enters a contract to work for another person for a specific period of time. Now, this could be in exchange for transportation to the new country, food, clothing, and shelter. This was not considered slavery, though people did lose their freedom for a period of time. And if they had children, they were not considered servants. Now, when Alice made the decision to do this, I'm sure in her mind, for her service, she would be given a new home with food and clothing, which may have been more than she had at that point. And in my opinion, it might be a fair trade. She knew life was going to be hard either way, so why not try something new, right? I mean, they would feed her, she'd get some clothes, she'd have to do a little work, but maybe it would be better than what she had. When she arrived to Georgia in January of 1734, she was sent to work for her new master, William Wise. Mr. Wise owned a cattle farm on Hutchinson Island, which was across the river from Savannah. He had been exiled from Savannah. Why? Well, first, he was untrustworthy and sketchy. So much so that he brought his own prostitutes, or now our PC term is sex worker, to Georgia. He tried to pass her off as his daughter. Why? Why do men do this? Do you realize how creepy it is when you're pawing at the woman who is supposed to be your, quote, daughter? But I digress. It is well understood that Mr. Wise was a tyrant and impossibly difficult. He would order his servants to bathe and groom him. He wasn't even allowed to go to Georgia in the beginning. He did it on his own without permission of the Georgia trustees, just a few months prior to Alice arriving herself. And instead of punishing England and sending Wise back, James Oglethorpe, the founder of Georgia, just exiled him to across the river. Basically, just get out of my sight. Which seems fair, I guess. But not really, I guess. I take that back. It wasn't fair. Because by the spring of 1734, Alice and her common-law husband, Richard, who were both working for him, Mr. Wise, were at their wits' end, and they were just plain done. Richard was charged with combing Wise's long hair, and Alice in charge of bathing him due to his declining health. Now, some claim that Wise's lewd comments and actions towards Alice rendered their daily routines unbearable, which, I mean, knowing he's a tyrant, unbearable, difficult, it makes sense. And March 1st, 1734 would be the last day that William Wise would torture anyone else, as he was found dead in his home. Ding dong, the monster's gone, the monster's gone, he's gone, gone, gone. Yes, I know. They found him with his head in a bucket of water and a neckerchief tied securely around his neck. Alright, it is so obvious his death was ruled a drowning, and he was the first, quote, victim of murder in Savannah. Alice was noticeably missing, as was Richard White, and he was considered her common-law husband. Obviously, suspicion rose around the community at their absence after such an event. And it's speculated that they did drown him and escaped on March 1st of 1734. Now, given the feelings of the time and the what you would call evidence that people would see, they were obviously found guilty after they were, you know, picked up again, because they did try to escape before the trial, but they were found. And so when they were found guilty afterwards, they were sentenced to hang. Richard was hung, but they couldn't quite hang Alice yet, because they discovered that she was pregnant with, dun dun dun, William Wise's baby. Yeah, you heard that right. William Wise was truly cruel in all ways. They waited until 4 weeks after the baby was born, ripped it out of her arms, and on January 19th, 1735, they, quote, strung her up, and she was the first woman to be hanged in Georgia. Now, I say it's speculated that they drowned William Wise because both her and Richard maintained their innocence until their last breath. Her body was left to hang for 3 days in the gallows until it is said that she disappeared mysteriously one night. Sadly, her baby became an orphan, but joined his parents only 2 to 4 weeks later. Some sources say 2, some say 4, but the baby was maybe 2 months old when he did pass away. If you want to pay your respects to baby James and Alice, they were buried in a plot just off Wright Square, today addressed as 9 West York Street. Now, at the time, there were some anti-Irish and anti-Catholic prejudices going on in the area. There is suspicion that the acting head magistrate, Thomas Costin, who was known to manipulate trial of juries and to gain victories agreeable, to his biased beliefs, basically he would rig the trial. So there's no way to know for sure if Alice Riley and Richard Wright really killed William Wise without any proof. And it's speculated. And it's more probable in my mind that truly if they were enduring such hardships, and if it really was his baby, then they had to end it. I don't condone that. I'm going to go ahead and just tell you, I'm not going to go out and just kill anybody. But we can't even prove that they really truly did it. It could have been any number of people. And it could have just been an act of defending themselves. Because no one knows what William Wise did that morning. He was sick. But no one truly knows what went down. So we cannot judge on any of it. Now, the problem is that given the amount of people who were anti-Irish, as well as anti-Catholic, you could see why their case was open and shut, why there wasn't much work to be done. And they were Irish immigrants. So obviously they had to be guilty, right? I mean, I'm talking about like them that time, not now. Now, there were some people who tried to say that Alice was spooky and devious, or that she was practicing witchcraft, black magic, or in some occult activities. In reality, this really was probably just propaganda by the anti-Catholic or the Protestant settlers of the time. And then there are some who have claimed she cursed Savannah as she was being hanged, and some residual energy is why the Spanish moss trees do not grow in this square. But they are the most common one, oaks in Savannah, so that would be interesting if there wasn't another legend that says Spanish moss will never grow where innocent blood has been spilled. So you see, there's no way to know. We have very little information. We don't know anything about why the Spanish mosses won't grow. Is it because Alice was innocent? Or is it because she cursed Savannah? In my opinion, I'm gonna go with Spanish moss will never grow where innocent blood has been spilled. Because I'm sure more blood has been spilled than just Alice Riley. Now, let's fast forward to 2025, and there have been claims that Alice will appear on occasions to mothers carrying their infants in their arms and attempt to take them. It's more likely that poor Alice is simply looking for her own baby. She possibly doesn't even know passed away a mere 2 to 4 weeks after her death. She can, at times, scream and cry to try and explain she's looking for her son, but before you can assist her, she vanishes. Police have even been called often due to this site, which is not questioned due to people dressing up in cosplay, essentially, of that time. According to one report, very often tourists have called the Savannah police and reported a woman looking for her child in Wright Square. The officers that have been around for a while know it is Alice. Rookies get sent out to look for her as a joke. They never find anything, of course. Even though she is often spotted in old-fashioned clothing from her day, no one thinks anything of it because of the guided tours in the downtown Savannah area that often have their guides dressed in historically accurate clothing. Right? That makes sense. Alice's apparition has reportedly appeared to more people than any other ghost in the city of Savannah. Perhaps, if you're brave enough to go to the Wright Square in the early hours of the evening, you too might catch a glimpse of her. She may even ask you to help her find her son. But beware, I'd be cautious in taking any more babies to Wright Square. You never know, Alice might just think it is James and attempt to steal the babe from your loving arms. And there's another recalling sight that a man and a woman were huddled together walking in a rainstorm on the road dressed in 18th century clothes. Was it Alice and Riley? I'm sorry. Alice and Richard? Did Richard stick around? Maybe he's just quiet. We all just want them to have a happy ending. And at the end of the day, it's hard to imagine getting that. But perhaps that's what happened. Maybe Alice found James and Richard, and they all just meander about together. Maybe someone could get the answers. That's not a bad idea. Maybe one day when I get to visit, I'll sit there and I'll try and talk to Alice myself and ask her. Now, whomever you see, be it our dear Tomochichi or Alice and her crew, I personally would respectfully handle the situation and then email harktisthetbell@gmail.com so we can all enjoy your experience too. I hope you guys have a spooky good week.